Today's video is the reveal of U.S. aircraft carriers in World War II, the undiscovered secrets beyond the battlefront. What are the war secrets of the nation associated with the aircraft carriers? Did you know that the aircraft carriers had cruise guns installed on their flight deck? Well, the Lexington-class aircraft carriers and Saratoga were the two battle cruiser hulls that were converted into aircraft carriers in 1927. Both the Lexington and Saratoga were equipped with 8-inch 55 caliber guns fitted into 4 twin turrets. 2 of it was located forward of the island, and the other 2 at the direction of the ship's stern. These guns were a deadly threat to the enemy cruisers. The potential damage caused by the enemies who targeted flight decks made the force rearrange these equipments. Lexington's 8-inch guns were removed in April 1942. In May 1942, Lexington was sunk in the Battle of Coral Sea. The fixations in Saratoga were also removed. It was replaced with 4 twin 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose gun mounts. It was during a yard period that the Saratoga was being repaired after a Japanese torpedo attack in January 1942. The next fact is an architectural art, the carriers with hinged smokestacks for flight operation. The U.S. Navy's first keel-up designed aircraft carrier, the Ranger, was built in 1930s. It has 6 smokestacks situated in the rear of the flight deck. The smoke from the boilers was vented to 6 stacks on the hinges. This helped in the dual setup of the smokestacks. These smokestacks were set upwards normally, but they can also be kept to the sides of the deck during flight operations. Such keen design and minute detailing of these huge warriors are what makes the war equipment of America unique. Progress is the key to better performance. The innovation of aircraft elevators and innovative aircraft elevated designs in carriers. The WASP was the United States aircraft carrier built during the Washington Naval Treaty in 1936. It had the features of the Ranger and Yorktown class incorporated into it. With innovative design features unique to its own, WASP had a separate class among the carriers. The most noticed feature of it was the deck edge aircraft elevator on the port side. In the WASP, the aircraft would sit in a crate and brought up to the flight deck on a swinging system. This system was also folded for storage. A larger deck edge elevator was built in its successor, the Essex class. It could hold 2 flights. These carriers were the best for a reason. The hangar deck aircraft catapults are the next facts that were hidden from us. The Yorktown class ships were built in the 1930s. These ships were equipped with 2 flight deck catapults to launch the aircraft. An aircraft catapult is a device used to allow aircraft to take off at a limited distance, typically from the deck of a vessel. The interesting fact about these Yorktown class ships is the 3rd flight deck catapult in the hangar deck. It was incorporated to launch the aircraft perpendicular to the flight deck. These were efficiently operated but removed from the Enterprise and Hornet after the Battle of Midway in June 1942. This design was followed by every other carrier built after the Yorktown sank. 2 Yorktown-class ships and 6 Essex-class carriers were equipped with 4 catapults. Variants of this philosophy were also trialed, but were removed after proving impractical. Different types of Essex-class carriers. Essex-class consisted of 24 vessels. It is the most numerous class of capital ships. These ships came in short-hull and long-hull versions. Among the ships that saw World War II, only 4 were long-hull types, the rest were short-hull types. The 4 long-hull types of Essex-class carriers that fought in World War II were unofficially named Ticonderoga, Randolph, Hancock, and Shangri-La. One of the differences was in the length. The long-hull Essex-class carriers were 888 feet in length, while the short-hull Essex-class carriers were 872 feet in length. Of the 24 carriers built, 13 were long hulls, and the remaining 11 were short hulls. USS Robin, the borrowed fleet carrier of the U.S. Navy. Can you believe that America has borrowed an aircraft during the World War II? In 1942, the USS Wasp CV-7 sank. In the Battle of Santa Cruz in October 1942, the Navy lost its Hornet and was left with only 2 fleet carriers. These carriers were the Enterprise, which was severely damaged in the Battle of Santa Cruz, and the Saratoga. The Navy was in bad shape without carrier ships. The circumstances left the Navy with no other option than to contact the British Royal Navy. In October 1942, the nation contacted the British Royal Navy regarding the loan of a fleet carrier. The nation needed a fleet carrier to join the Navy in the Pacific Fleet. The Chief of Naval Operations and Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Fleet was Admiral Ernest J. King. He requested a carrier to the British Royal Navy after the Battle of Midway. In December, the Enterprise was sent out of the combat zone for training. This left the Saratoga alone to continue operations. A Navy liaison team was stationed on the ship to teach the Royal Navy the ways of United States carried operations. The Royal Navy crew also received U.S. Navy uniforms. Handling Avenger torpedo bombers was unfamiliar to the crew, and despite being undertrained, the crew was excellent in performance, the assistance of a U.S. aircraft carrier in capturing a warship. In June 1944, the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal led a hunter-killer group on the coast of northwestern Africa. It was during the Battle of the Atlantic that an anti-submarine warship was actively deployed to attack German submarines and to assist convoys crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Guadalcanal was assisted by 6 destroyer escorts. On the 4th of June 1944, the Kriegsmarine U-boat U-505 was captured by the U.S. Navy. The USS Chatelaine DE-149 was one of the destroyer escorts. It hit the U-boat. The U-boat was severely damaged. The rudder was jammed and the aft apartments were flooded. The U-boat was forced to the surface under gunfire from the U.S. ships. The captain of the U-boat believed that the ship would sink, hence he commanded to abandon the ship. The crew of Kriegsmarine fished away from the ship. The U-boat was later repaired and made seaworthy by the United States Navy. The Guadalcanal then proudly towed the U-505 from northwestern African waters to Bermuda. This perilous journey ended on June 19th. This was the first time since 1812 that the U.S. Navy captured an enemy vessel on the high seas. The first is always celebrated the best. The captured U-505 was transported to the Chicago Museum in 1954. It is in the Chicago Museum up to date. The U.S. Navy's freshwater aircraft carriers. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Navy was thrown into World War II, and the aircraft fleet was limited and heavily engaged at the outset of the war. The biggest problem raised was the need for new pilots in its carrier fleet. Carriers were a must-have, for it was essential for the new pilots to understand naval aviation and the real-life dynamic of flying to and flying from aircraft carriers. In 1941, Commander Richard F. Whitehead from Glenview Naval Air Station foresaw this issue. He was an aviation aide at the Great Lakes Training Center. Having the background, his solution was efficient. He suggested converting lake steamers into training aircraft carriers. Although the Bureau of Ships ignored this idea, soon after Pearl Harbor, the nation was left with no other option than to take this suggestion. In March 1942, the U.S. Navy purchased a side paddle wheel liner CNB for conversion and the side paddle wheel liner Greater Buffalo was put to action in August 1942. To get the carrier qualification, the pilot is required to take off and land 10 times successfully from the vessels. The Sangamon-class escort aircraft carriers. In the 1940s, the U.S. Navy made plans to bolster its carrier fleet with new fleet carrier designs, such as the Essex fleet, to prevent the conflict on the horizon. The Essex class was built in 1941, and the demand for quicker availability brought in the idea to build smaller converted aircraft carriers. The widely known from these were the Independence-class light carriers. These were converted from the Cleveland class, with the idea gaining traction in October 1941. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had pushed for the conversion of merchant hulls into smaller carriers. The first modern U.S. escort aircraft carriers were built on this compulsion. The first ships converted and put into service were the escort carriers Long Island and Charger. Later, in 1942, a new escort carrier conversion program was set for 24 ships with only 20 C3 hulls ready to convert. The last 4 ships that were used for the conversion were Cimarron-class fleet oilers, which were proved as the most effective escort carrier conversions. The conversion team had considered the drawbacks of previous escorts to come up with a better outcome in all aspects. This is not all. There is more to everything we hear. Hope the video was both interesting and informative. For more videos, subscribe to our channel, and do not forget to like the video.